Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. We got a man here who ticks day and night, trying to make the city go in a new direction. His name is Steve Orosco. He's running for office this year. He's running for state senate in the 11th district. That's Hamden and New Haven, big portions of both. And he's a Republican taking on the leading Democrat in the state senate, Martin Looney of New Haven, who has served 15 terms and serves as the president of the pro tem of the Senate. Steve Orosco, welcome to Dateline New Haven.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me.
And I'm going to ask you to get real close to that mic, so maybe move it close to your mouth so we can hear you nice and clear.
All right, how we doing?
We're doing great, yeah.
All right, let's
go.
go.
And so you're taking on a big target. How come you're running? How's it going?
You know, so far so good. I'm enjoying the campaign race. Like you know, I ran for alderman, so I learned a lot during that campaign, the 60-day campaign that I did have. And
we're just fixing Steve's mic here so you can hear him well. Thank you, Harry Jones.
That's better?
Our station manager.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, campaign is doing very well. And, you know, I moved back to Connecticut, New Haven 2 years ago, literally right before COVID happened.
Back?
Yes. So I was in L.A. for the last 10 years.
What's L.A. like? You know, I got to tell you, since I don't live there, I visited.
Yeah.
It just seems to me like it's streets, like that you drive down.
So being a New England kid, you know, I grew up in Newport, Rhode Island. Wherever we lived, we always lived by the ocean. So in L.A., we were in Marina Del Rey. So it goes Marina Del Rey, Venice Beach, Santa Monica. So it didn't feel like
Lived in all three?
No, but I'm just kind of giving you the lay of the land as far as geographics. But I always lived by the ocean, so it didn't really feel like I was in L.A. You know, you drive,
and you're in the harbor now, Morris Cove.
Yep, in Morris Cove.
So why do you always go to the water? What is it about the ocean?
Yeah, I think growing up in Newport, Aquinic Island, I'm a water kid at heart.
But, you know, a lot of people feel that way. They really like to live at the water, and it's not something I relate to. I mean, I really like being near a lake, but what do you think that is? What are people looking for? I get a little philosophical here.
Yeah,
Steve.
I think you just feel, number one, it humbles you. You feel how vast everything is, and I think you just feel the energy of the ocean. You know,
so much is going on there through nature, whether
so
it's
much
storms
is going
or
on.
calm or below the surface. There are ecosystems and all the different forms of life, and the waves change along with the moon and the tides, and it's like
agreed.
Something bigger than you that's forceful.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound disrespectful to anybody, but I feel like the closer you go to the ocean, the nicer people become. People just seem to be more pleasant.
Well, that's something about nature.
Yeah, absolutely
nature
true.
humbles you, and it pulls you away from the constant struggle of just getting by day to day in this materialistic, mechanistic world, huh?
Absolutely.
All right,
I agree with you.
We're getting a little philosophical. Let's get back to politics.
That's
okay,
all right.
Politics philosophical. Tell me about that. Okay, so why are you someone who's pursuing office? You're pursuing it from a party that's, what is like 10-1 outnumbered in New Haven.
Yes, we are 10.
You're going against a very, interesting incumbent who's very popular.
Absolutely.
So why are you doing it?
You know, like I said, when I came back here, I realized there needed to be a lot of change, not just in New Haven, but Connecticut as a whole. And it wasn't until I dove into our history and dove into who our leaders were, especially running for alderman, realizing of all 30 wards, all 30 were Democrat. And
not just that, every state legislative seat, the only thing Republican win is this crooked state law that say Democrats and Republicans have to be registrar voters even if they lose. Then a third party, you have to pay for 3 of them.
Absolutely.
So the only thing Republicans win in New Haven is uncontested. Didn't used to be that way when I came here at first.
Yeah, and that's wild. I know they've controlled the House since the 80s. I think we had one election that we won as far as the Senate in the House having control. And we haven't, Louis's been in the seat since 1993. We haven't even had a Republican mayor since 1953.
Well, 51, you're right, 53 elections, so 1954, right? Yeah, that was William Celentano.
When I look at those facts, it sets me back a little bit, because if people are always complaining about New Haven, the crime, the education, the poverty rate, the taxes, and I said to myself, why don't we just make a change? Why don't you take a risk and just vote across party lines for once and just see what happens? It can't get worse than what it is now. So
I like New Haven.
Yeah, no, I love.
You're saying there are problems that are not being addressed.
Yeah, problems aren't being addressed. Like if I really talk about numbers, education, 93% of our schools are below average. That's not okay. Our crime.
The reading numbers are really low. Yeah.
Really, you guys actually recently had an article.
Like different reading measures, but they're often single digits about reading at grade level.
Yeah, and that's just bizarre to me. Our crime is at a crime index of 6, and which people don't understand. That means we're more dangerous than 94% of the rest of the country. Did not know that until I found that out. You know, our taxes, we have a poverty rate is at 25 or 26% now. And a lot of that has to do with taxes. You know, taxes are a problem because it's such a slow drip into poverty. People don't realize it.
Although you're saying tax payments put people into poverty, but most people right above poverty do not pay tax or hardly any tax. Their earned income tax credit really prevents them from having to pay it. Liberals would argue that taxes pay for helping people get out of poverty. Conservatives argue that the way that money is spent doesn't lift people out of poverty but keeps them dependent.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
So those are the two sides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're at this point, which drives me crazy, that people aren't willing to compromise and come up with this solution. It's red versus blue. It's Yankees versus Red Sox. It's Redskins versus Cowboys. You have to ride with your team no matter what, instead of finding a solution. Because at the end of the day, those issues that I just spoke about, those don't have, or they should not have, party affiliation. Like, we all want the same exact thing for our community. You know, I have an 8-year-old. I want him to get a good education. I want the streets to be safe for him. That doesn't cross party lines. You know, I ran for alderman, and this is the first time I ever did door knocking. And I only did it for 30 days because I had torn my Achilles in July.
How's it now?
Yeah, it's still not right. It's still not right.
Because you do mixed martial arts, so you work out a lot.
I work out a lot.
So you're still able to, even with the injury?
Yes, I can work out now. I just can't do certain things. Like, I can't even do a single calf raise on my left leg, but I can do a lot of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
So the 30 days I did have to campaign, I started over in the Raynham Apartments, because it was just a very dense place. I could knock on a lot of doors at once. And every door that I knocked, everyone had the same exact issue. Most of it was public safety up there because they're hidden in the back and they feel very unsafe and not secure. And police really don't go back there. They kind of feel like a forgotten community.
It's a big district. They're talking about breaking into two. It might be the biggest in the city. You know, it goes all the way from Morris Cove up to the North Haven line. And
Yep. So, you know, when talking to these residents, I just realized, why are we arguing over red versus blue when we all have the same issue? Shouldn't we be voting for who you think can make the change?
Mm-hmm.
And I really haven't seen a lot of change in New Haven over the last, 30 years, to be honest. It's only gone downhill.
So what would be some things you would want to do, Steve, if elected state senator to address some of these problems?
Man, listen, the first and the most important thing is budget allocation. I mean, everything should be run like a business, if you ask me. Like, you need to generate revenue for your city. You need to cut costs. You need to figure out where these costs are going and if they make sense. I remember Elker came out with his budget allocation recently in a YouTube video, and I'm just seeing some of the pillars like climate change office. And I'm thinking to myself, why do we need to spend money on a climate change office in New Haven when we have schools that aren't even performing at grade level? Like, why would that be more important? So I asked myself these questions, or even other things like COVID committees. We're going to spend $100,000 on a COVID committee when we have teachers who should be getting paid more money. I feel like the foundation is way more important than these extracurricular benefits that they put forth.
Now, you talk about city budget there, and you did run for all their state government funds a lot of the city budget. Now we're up to, thanks to Martin Looney, it doubled this year from payments in lieu of taxes from just under 50 million, just under 100 million. What would you like to see differently with that funding stream?
Even with the taxes, let's talk about pilot. I don't know if people know this as well. 60% of the property in New Haven is tax exempt, which you probably know. 30% of it, half of that is owned by Yale. Well, that 60% equates about $8.5 billion in taxable property. Half of that would be $4.7 billion. Broke that down into taxes, that we're losing $120 million a year in just tax revenue. And every single year, I just feel like in New Haven, the solution to every problem is just increase taxes. Let's just make all the citizens pay for everything. That's not a solution. So then one day, what is 80% of the tax, 80% of the property?
Well, we do get reimbursed. I agree with you, by the way, with the Yale thing, but we do get reimbursed for the majority of that. Not all of it, though.
Yeah, no, definitely not. But at some point, is the 90% of the city
so
going to be
Steve,
taxed?
what would you do differently in terms of state aid to the city? Would you have different rules, different considerations for how it's done, more money given, less, directed to different places?
It has to be directed to different places. Like I said, I don't know exactly where every single dollar goes in this city.
No, I meant state, if you're state senator.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it has to be allocated differently. It has to be. our schools need to get more money. We need more funding. And I know Mr. Martin Looney is a very powerful man in New Haven. I know he gets what he wants from the state, which is a great thing.
So how would we get more funding for schools without raising taxes?
Well, we first would have to ask for more money. But again, if you allocate money differently from other areas and fund the schools directly, you're going to have a higher budget for your schools.
So what would be allocated away from?
Like just a great example would be a climate change office.
No, the state. If you state aid to the city.
Say that again.
If the state's going to send more money to the schools for the city schools, which I think a lot of people do agree, that's one of those issues, being an example of yours about not red versus blue. Yeah. What would the state cut in order to fund that without raising people's taxes to send more money to the schools?
Well, that's something you usually have to sit down and look over the budget and where the money's going, and figure out what can be cut. I mean, that's something that they do every single year, and they decide, hey, what's going to go in the budget the next year? What are we going to increase? What are we going to decrease?
Steve Orosco, running for the 11th State Senate District seat currently held by Martin Looney. And so you said you grew up in Newport, Rhode Island.
Correct.
And then you went out to L.A.
Correct.
What brought you out to L.A.?
Well, can I backtrack?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell me about growing up.
So Newport, Rhode Island, I ended up going to New York City first. I went to Pace University in Manhattan, got a double major in finance and marketing. I worked at Charles Schwab on Wall Street. And then I got recruited by a firm here in Connecticut called Barnum Financial Group in Shelton. Barnum? In Shelton, Connecticut.
Is that like that part of Shelton where there's just a million glass towers and you're sort of in like Glass City?
Yeah, actually,
right off Route 8.
When I was there, they were in their first location, but when they blew up in the last decade, they moved into those glass towers, I believe.
You're a beach guy. What was it like going into a glass tower every day? I think I would go crazy, like I'd become an alcoholic.
Well, I think, so again, when I moved to New York City, I fell in love with it. You know, and I always tell people I think everyone should live in New York City once in their life because the culture, the diversity, the fast pace, it humbles you, and it's a beautiful thing. It's like, oh my God, I really feel like an ant. You know, it's the opposite of how you feel by the ocean. And I loved it. I don't love it so much now when I go back. I kind of feel like claustrophobic. Get me back to the ocean. But I enjoyed it. I was there for 5 years. When I came to Connecticut, again, Barnum Financial, I went back to school. I went to Albertus. I got a double master's. I got my MBA and my MSM. And at the time, I was training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Is that capoeira?
No, I guess you could say it's grappling. It'd be ground fighting, per se.
And what drew you to that?
So I started wrestling when I was 5 years old. So I would say wrestling is what made me who I am today. Mm-hmm. Just the grind, the accountability. You're fully responsible for yourself. The more work you put in, the more work you get out. You can't blame others when you fail, when you lose. You got to look yourself in the mirror every day. Mm-hmm. And I always say it built me. And when I found jiu-jitsu later in life, I fell in love with it so much that I said I wanted to be a pro fighter. And we moved to California. I became a pro fighter 2011 to 2016. I stopped fighting.
What does it mean to be a pro fighter?
You actually get paid to fight, I guess you could say. You start as
what kind of fighting? Mixed martial arts?
Mixed martial arts,
and I'm not really familiar with that stuff, just what I see on your website. Is that wrestling?
Yeah, so it would be cage fighting. So if you ever watch the UFC, you get in a cage, there's 3 5-minute rounds.
And it's not like professional wrestling where it's made up. Like this is real. This is real. And what are the limits where you can't beat the crap out of someone? Like you can't hit them in the head, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can't punch to the back of the head. You can't knee to the face on the ground. You can't eye gouge. You can't fish hook. Obviously, no strikes to the groin. And
does anyone cheat?
Is
there a really good ethic of self-preservation?
Yeah, there's a lot of self-preservation, and the rules are so minimal. It's hard to. There's been times where you knee someone in the face. And because as they're getting up, you don't realize it because things happen so fast.
So 5 years, this is your day job?
This was it. I literally lived in the gym.
And you made a living doing mixed martial arts?
I did. And I would train people on the side because I was in the gym. I had trained three times a day.
You make a living and afford living in L.A. by the beach.
Yeah. So at that point, I was in San Diego. So we were in San Diego for those first 5 years. Again, I'm the type of person that likes to go to the hotbed of everything. Mm-hmm. So when I wanted to be in finance, I was like, let me find the closest school to Wall Street. It was Pace University. When I wanted to fight, I said San Diego was literally the mecca for MMA at the time, the most pro teams in one population.
What team were you on?
I was on Team Arena, and then I was on Alliance. So my last fight was Alliance.
And would there be big crowds like you'd fight, be on TV and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you have a name that you went by, or just
Yeah, it was actually called Hulk Smash.
Hulk Smash?
Hulk Smash, yeah.
Is it with HULKSMAC? What's
Yeah.
that, like the big Hulk? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So
how'd you come up with that name?
names are earned, not given, I always say. And so because of wrestling and I was in jiu-jitsu, I would always be on top of people and smothering them. So people would always say, Steve's always Hulk smashing people, because I was very strong for my weight. So that's where the name came from. But after I stopped fighting, I had my last fight in Melbourne, Australia in 2016.
And why'd you end it?
I was just done. I was just mentally done. So I was 8-0 as a pro when I had the opportunity to go to Australia to fight their #1 kid. And I had to cut 20 pounds that week.
You cut 20 pounds in a week?
Yeah,
How'd you do that?
Well, 23 pounds actually. Just literally training and then the sauna. You lose so when you go in the sauna, the day of, because your weigh-ins are the day before you fight. So that morning, the day before, you would go and cut weight. I'd go and cut about 10 pounds that morning.
Through just sweating it out.
Yeah, so you sit.
Could you fall sick doing that?
You feel it in your kidneys. That's when you know you're coming down to the wire. Your kidneys your lower back starts to tighten up, and it's obviously not a healthy thing. It's the worst part about fighting. And all the years of wrestling, I always had to cut weight in the first place, but there's such a disparity between weight classes. So I fought at 155, but the next weight class is 171. That's such a big difference when I normally just walk around at 180 pounds. So for me to fight at 170 was I felt too small for that weight class because the other guys are dropping from 190, 195 pounds to make 170.
So Steve Orosco, after you fought through 2016, you then went into the business of it, right? Owning gyms and having a league. You run a league now.
I do own a league. I do. We actually have our next show in Los Angeles, May 19th, actually, after not having one for 2.5 years.
So after studying business, being in business, going into mixed martial arts, you then stayed in mixed martial arts, combining with your business experience to start a league and gyms.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you get at least my MBA program, Alberta's was a beautiful thing because they teach you to find bottlenecks within an organization. So you have the consultancy mindset. So when I stopped fighting, I asked myself, what could I do to make my sport better? And at the time, MMA had grown so fast in such a short period of time, I felt the crowd hadn't caught up with it. Meaning it's a very aggressive crowd, tap out T-shirts, Bud Lights, which is fine, very NASCAR-esque. But what about the Formula One crowd? What about people that go to a major boxing event with their wives in a gown and they're in a tuxedo and a fur coat? I wanted that crowd to come, and it turned out to be a beautiful thing. So
how'd you get them?
Say that again?
How did you get them in?
Oh, word of mouth. All word of mouth.
Okay, so let's bring it home now. So you've done all this. You came back to New Haven. Was that family reasons?
I think everyone gets homesick when you move.
But did you live in New Haven?
So I lived in the Cove from 2000. Let me think about this. 2005 to 2009.
While you were at Albertus and Shelton.
But my wife was born and raised in the Cove.
What's her name?
Janine Candela.
Mm-hmm.
So the Candelas, they were the Worcester Square. They came Ellis Island, Worcester Square, eminent domain. Had to move to the Cove like a lot of people. They built a house over on Hall Street. Been there ever since. Still
so they're
there.
Sort of like the right turn lane on the I-91 is where they used to live.
Absolutely.
And that leaves a bad taste people's mouth about what government does. Yeah.
I always feel like when you're in the Cove, you don't feel like you're in New Haven. It's like this.
So you bring it home. You decide you're going to run. You made your sport different. You combined your background in business and in wrestling since you were 5 years old. First as a wrestler, a performer, a combatant, and then as someone who tried to change the industry and has made a living in the business.
Absolutely. And
so tell me.
Now also, you said it, and I apologize. I didn't.
Don't apologize.
Catch it. I opened a gym in Milford as well when I came back, so I wanted to obviously own something here.
So now bring this home.
Yeah.
What are the mixed martial art moves you're going to make as a candidate for Senate in the Senate in order to get there and govern?
My mixed martial arts moves, I am going to dethrone Mr. Martin Looney, and I'm going to make a splash and be the only probably Republican in my district.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be fun.
And then anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, not at all.
Steve Orosco, I always love interviewing you.
Thank you.
I love to see you in the arena. in the political arena, in the mixed martial arts arena, in the Morris Cove arena. Stay in touch with us during the campaign.
Absolutely.
We'll be following you.
I expect to be on here maybe once a month. How about
All right,
that?
and Martin Looney says he's up for a debate that we'll sponsor in the fall.
Okay. I'm excited for
But
that.
you got a convention. When's your convention?
It is actually next week. The 5th and 6th or 6th and 7th. Yeah.
And is anyone? Oh, you're going to the state one.
Yeah, the state one.
You're not having a local convention in the district. They just
Oh,
named you
you're
there?
talking about for endorsements? I think that's on the 15th. I'm sorry.
Okay, but you don't have any opponent, I don't think.
No. So
All right.
that's why I didn't. It's not a big deal.
Steve Orosco in the political ring. We're going for the 11th state Senate district race, and here on Dateline New Haven. Folks, we take a little break. We come back. We're going to be going back 400 years in time without leaving the block. So stay tuned to find what that's about. In the meantime, we're going to listen to the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day, all night long. WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.